Things are heating up. Can you feel it? It's been warm in parts of Britain, although not as warm as climate crisis experts predicted. By this I mean the latest figures released by the United Nations Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, the infamous IPCC, show the world's temperature hasn't risen for 15 years. According to press reports last week, politicians in Germany, Hungary, Belgium and the United States, politicians who depend on climate crisis scientists' computer modelling and predictions to justify their hugely expensive green energy policies, apparently wanted the many hundreds of scientists around the world responsible for the report to cover up the inconvenient truth that Earth's temperature has plateaued for a decade and a half. The report was just quietly slipped out onto the internet instead, without press release or any other fanfare. The report will nonetheless be used by governments to inform their policies around the green revolution and net zero, those fantasies driving the move away from carbon fuels and towards wind turbines and solar panels, subsidised by taxpayers in the form of hugely inflated energy bills. Coming to conclusions about the complexities of the climate is a complicated business. Surely we, the people, are therefore entitled to hear all of the latest facts, delivered always with the same intensity, so that we might ask questions and thereby better understand why politicians want to make the decisions they do. Why then, when they're so quick to tell us the bad news, any signs of imminent catastrophe, ticking clocks to the end of the world as we know it, are they less inclined to shout from the rooftops when the data tells a different story, a story lacking the desired acceleration towards global doom, a story that might loosen the shackles of fear just a little? I wonder. For a while there, the United States was energy independent, able to exceed their own needs. Not now, and costs there are rising. Like us, Americans are being forced to get used to fuel and other energy that gets more expensive every day. Australia, another first world country, is telling her people to grab a blanket to stay warm this winter. Last week, consumers in New South Wales, which includes Sydney, and also Hunter Valley, a hugely rich source of coal, were told to save energy by turning out the lights and using their white goods, washing machines and the like, only in the evening to avert the risk of blackouts. Australia ships coal to China and elsewhere in massive quantities. She's also one of the world's largest producers of gas. But while that resource is also still being exported in vast quantities, Australian homes seem destined to get colder and darker. If Australia, a land in thrall to the heat of the sun, cannot make a go of solar, then who can? Critics say it's all down to lack of investment in renewables. I say it's about keeping a population already driven to the edge of reason by totalitarian types and their punitive pandemic regulations, in a permanent state of anxiety. There are so many moving parts in this conundrum, it's all but impossible to keep up with the complexities, to keep an eye on all of it. Here at home, the Bank of England put up interest rates. This is a move apparently designed to slow inflation. Let us remember that the inflation was caused by the banks themselves by creating eye-watering quantities of imaginary money, that game they call quantitative easing. And some experts say a rise in interest rates will only heap yet more suffering on we the people. Here we go. Mortgage repayments and the like are set to rise. It's important to keep things simple, I find, when it comes to understanding how banks operate. Basically, it seems to me that they lend us money that doesn't exist and then demand we pay it back with actual earned money, proof of work, plus interest. Now is the time to keep an eye on those bankers, more than ever. Back in 2008, they got in over their heads. The economy here and others around the world teetered on the brink of collapse thanks to their reckless gambling and gaming of systems they thought, in their hubris, they both understood and could control. Unluckily for them, and for us it turned out, they didn't and couldn't. Luckily for them, governments allowed them to let themselves off the hook. Their self-created mess was mopped up, written off in every way that mattered. The crucial difference was made with taxpayers' money, our money, the only money any government ever has. Now the stage is set for we, the people, to be in over our heads. Those bankers lent us money to buy our houses. Imaginary money, remember. It's incumbent upon us to settle those debts, to pay it back. Now interest rates are going up and may keep going up until those debts become unpayable for too many. At that point, the banks will help themselves to our homes and to our businesses. They call it foreclosure, but in the context of the nonsense they got up to and got off with in 2008, I call it theft, premeditated theft. We bailed those banks out, or rather, our governments dipped into our futures, our wallets and purses and helped themselves to what they needed. We took the hit on their behalf while they simply got back to the business of creating funny money and trousering the profit as if nothing had happened. If those same banks proceed to foreclose on the millions who, through no fault of our own, and on account of those bankers' manipulations of a corrupt system they had spun around themselves like spiders' webs, if we find we can no longer keep up with our mortgages and our debts, then I say we are in the grip not of a banking industry and government working in our best interests, but rather a crime syndicate, a cartel, a bunch of gangsters. If the largesse granted to them in 2008 was extended to us, they would simultaneously write off our debts while still leaving us with holding the keys and, more importantly, the deeds to our homes and businesses and the rest. That's how they would treat each other, those bankers, a clean slate. Here in Britain, our very means of providing for ourselves are being shut down. In a time of global food anxiety, our farmland is being rewilded, handed back to the beavers, God love them. Farmers are being paid to leave their fields fallow or to quit the industry altogether. Consumption of meat is the new smoking. If the powers that be have their way, eating a steak will be as socially unacceptable as blowing cigarette smoke into a baby's face. It'll be bugs for the kids' school dinners soon enough, no doubt, and then for the rest of us at home. If you haven't already realised, there is, in my opinion, no intention whatever to replace 30 million petrol and diesel cars with electric alternatives. The intention is that most of us will simply have no cars. Same goes for heat pumps in homes. Much simpler to accept we are being groomed not for going green, but for going without. Colder homes, working from home because we have no cars to go anywhere, flying domestically or internationally made so expensive and such a pain as to be not worth doing, leaving the skies free for private jets. If you cannot make sense of what you're seeing, first you have to grasp, I say, that none of it is accidental. On the contrary, it's planned. They even told us so 2 years ago when one world leader after another stood up to declare that the pandemic was a chance, a narrow open window through which to build back better. But listen closely to the language. Build back better. Windows of opportunity. A once-in-a-generation chance. President Joe Biden himself talks now about transformational change. Even our own Prince Charles, heir to the British throne, trumpets his support for the Great Reset on his website. If and when he is king in a constitutional monarchy, such overt involvement in national and geopolitics must surely herald a constitutional crisis of note, but that's a thought for another day. While we're on the subject of reset, however, let us also pause to remember that in Scots law at least, reset refers to the redistribution of stolen goods, which is interesting to say the least. Whatever COVID is or was, it has been used to greenlight the revolution they had in mind. Now, to keep us always moving in the direction they want, they fall back on the climate crisis that's been used to scare the bejesus out of us whenever necessary for over 150 years. What we are seeing, hard though it may be to believe or to accept, appears to be the attempt to bring about the deliberate destruction of personal wealth. What's happening around us, one crisis after another, disease, war and death, shortage of energy, cost of fuel, shortage of food, destruction of farmland, always the ever-present shadow of climate catastrophe and the end of the world. If you're frightened, it's because you're supposed to be frightened. Frightened people are easy. I say this, the end of the world is not nigh, but there are among us those who would change it beyond a recognition in service of their own desires. The civilization we have loved is most certainly under attack from within. First of all, we have simply to notice and accept as much. And having done that, we, the people, can reclaim our world because it is and always has been ours.